Hey everybody, welcome back. We're reading Martin Heidegger's Metaphysics. He was a German philosopher. This text is translated from the original German. He's very wordy, but nonetheless very fascinating, and we can learn from him. Okay, we are in the section titled The Question of the Essence of Being, and we're on page 88. Okay. As convincing as this reflection may seem to be, it is nonetheless untrue. Let us mention two reasons. 1. It is questionable, to begin with, whether the universality of being is that of a genus. Aristotle already suspected this. Consequently, it remains questionable whether an individual being can ever count as an example of being at all. As this oak does for a tree in general. Because there's such a vast difference in variation. It is questionable whether the ways of being as nature, being as history, represents species of the genus being. That's clever. Number 2, the word being is a universal name. It is true, and seemingly one word among others. But this seeming is deceptive. The name and what its names are one of a kind. Therefore, we distort it fundamentally if we try to illustrate it by examples. Well, we have to use examples. We have to, though. Precisely because every example in this case manifests not so much as one might say, but always too little. Earlier, we stressed that we must already know in advance what tree means in order to be able to seek and find what is particular, the species of trees and individual trees as such. This is all the more decisively true of being. Yet he just said, though, if we define it, we will reduce it. The necessity for us already to understand the word being is the highest and is incomparable. So the universality of being in regard to all beings does not imply that we should turn away from this universality as fast as possible and turn to the particular. Instead, it implies the opposite, that we should remain there and raise the uniqueness of this name and its naming to the level of knowledge. The fact that for us the meaning of the word being remains an intermediate vapor is counterbalanced by the fact that we still understand being and distinguish it with certainty from not being. And this is not just another second fact, but both belong together as one. In the meantime, this one has completely lost the character of a fact for us. By no means do we find it among many other present at hand things as something that is also present at hand. Instead, we suspect that in what we have taken up to now merely as fact, there is something going on. It is happening in a way that does not fit into the series of other incidents. I wouldn't call being the word as a vapor, because vapor is almost unseen, and since it's so diluted down, it's hard to see how it measures up to the whole atmosphere. So being, if we dilute it down that way, we could say, hey, well, being is diluted if we name it and we try to classify it. But I'd say no. We expand upon it. We don't dilute it. And it gets expanded upon in degrees depending on the context, I'd say. But before we concern ourselves any further with grasping in its truth what is going on in this fact, let us try once again and for the last time to take it as something familiar and indifferent. Okay, so he wants us to look at being as something familiar, but an indifferent familiar. Let's see. Let us assume that there is no such fact at all. Suppose that there were no intermediate meanings of being, and that we did not understand what this meaning signifies. Then what? Would there just be one noun and one verb less in our language? No. Then there would be no language at all. Beings as such would no longer open themselves up in words at all. They could no longer be addressed and discussed. Well, even if we didn't say the word being, we would make up a word for being. For saying beings as such involves understanding beings as beings. Okay. That is, their being in advance. Okay, so when we say beings, we are implying, or at least it involves a degree of us trying to say that we understand beings as beings and how that relates to being. Okay. Presuming that we did not understand being at all, presuming that the word being did not even have the evanescent meaning, then there would not be any single word at all. We ourselves could never be those who say. We would never be able to be those who we are. For to be human means to be a sayer. Hey, that's interesting. For to be human is to be a sayer. I've never heard that before. Human beings are yes and no sayers only because they are, in the ground of their essence, sayers, the sayers. That is their distinction and also their predicament. Wow, that's interesting. So, we are inherent sayers, he's contending, and that our inherent sayer nature is part of our essence. And it's a benefit, but also a dilemma. It distinguishes them from stones, plants, and animals, but also from the gods. Even if we had 1,000 eyes and 1,000 ears and 1,000 hands and many other senses and organs, if our essence did not stand within the power of language, then all beings would remain closed off to us. Okay, so he's giving a lot of credit here to language, yes. The beings that we ourselves are no less than the beings that we are not. Thus, as we review our discussion up to this point, the following state of affairs becomes apparent. When we set out by proposing this as a fact, this, which shall for now remain nameless, that for us being is only an empty word with an evanescent meaning. Okay, so he keeps contending this, okay? That being is a word that has more of an evanescent meaning than anything else. Then we dispose it and thus demote it from its authentic rank. In contrast, for our design, this, that we understand being, if only in an infinite way, has the highest rank, insofar as in this a power announces itself in which the very possibility of the essence of our Dasein is grounded. Okay. Our Dasein is linked to our essence, and the power is in and of itself. Okay. It is not one fact among others, but that which merits the highest worth according to its rank, provided that our Dasein, which is always a historical Dasein, does not remain a matter of indifference to us. Yet even in order for Dasein to remain an indifferent being for us, we must understand being. So even if we're indifferent to it, we still have to understand it. Without this understanding, we could not even say no to our Dasein. Interesting premise. Only insofar as we deem this preeminence, there's a German word, Verrang, of the understanding of being worth in its own rank, rang, do we preserve this preeminence as its rank. And I'm probably pronouncing those wrong because I don't speak German. In what way can we deem this rank worthy, perceive it in its worth? This we cannot decide arbitrarily. Well, we shouldn't decide anything arbitrarily when it comes to worth, right? Because the understanding of being fades away, at first and for the most part, in an indefinite meaning, and nonetheless remains certain and definite in this knowledge, because consequently the understanding of being, despite all its rank, is dark, confused, covered over, and concealed. It must be illuminated, disentangled, and ripped away from concealment. That can happen only insofar as we inquire about this understanding of being. Okay, so he's probably urging us to inquire about being, which I think he is, which I think he's hinted to many times previously, which at first we simply treated as fact in order to put it into question. Questioning is the genuine and the right and the only way of deeming worthy that which, by its highest rank, holds our Dasein in its power. This understanding of being of ours and being itself altogether is therefore what is most worthy of questioning in all questioning. Yes, we should question everything. To doubt is to be human, right? We question all the more genuinely, the more immediately and directly we hold on to what is most worthy of questioning, namely, that for us being is what we understand in a completely indefinite and yet supremely definite way. Ooh. So being is something that can be understood indefinitely, but the way in which you understand it has a definite way. Very clever with words there. We understand the word being, and hence all its inflections, even though it looks as if this understanding were indefinite. We say of what we thus understand, of whatever opens itself up to us, somehow in understanding, that it has meaning, Sinn, I think that's a German word, Sinn, being insofar as it is understood at all, has meaning. To experience and conceive of being as what is most worthy of questioning, to inquire especially about being, then means nothing other than asking about the meaning of being. So to experience it, to conceive it, to question it, to inquire. Okay. In the treatise Being and Time, the question of the meaning of being is posed and developed explicitly as a question for the first time in the history of philosophy. The treatise also contains an explicit statement and grounding of what is meant by meaning, namely the openness of being, not only of beings as such, see Beings and Time, section 32, 4465. Why may we no longer call what we have just mentioned a fact? Why was this designation misleading from the start? Because this, that we understand being, does not just occur in our Dasein like the fact, say, that we possess earlobes of such and such of sort. Instead of earlobes, some other structure could form part of our hearing organ. That we understand being is not just actual, it is also necessary. Okay, so without such an opening up of being, we could not be human in the first place. Oh, so basically, being is part of what makes us human. Of course, it is not unconditionally necessary that we should be. That's true, we don't necessarily need to exist. There is always the possibility that there could be no human beings at all. After all, there was a time when there were no human beings. But strictly speaking, we cannot say there was a time when there were no human beings. Why not? At every time, there were and are and will be human beings. That's not true. You don't know that. Because time temporizes itself only as long as there are human beings. So because humans are the ones who measure time, without humans time wouldn't exist and time only exists because humans have formulated it? No. Time exists regardless. The sun will rise, it will go down. Okay, that is how we're going to measure the time. That's regardless if humans exist or not. Just like the geologists can show us, regardless of what's on this planet, the old will be at the bottom, the younger will be on the top when it comes to the sedimentary rock formations. That's what he's talking about. There is no time in which there were no human beings. Yeah, when the dinosaurs existed. What are you talking about? Not because there are human beings from all eternity and for all eternity, but because time is not eternity. To say eternity is to imply a measurement of time, so I don't agree with that. And time in each case temporizes itself only at one time. Okay, yes, 1 second, 2 second, 3 second, yes, it's happening right now as I'm counting, right? But that'll happen regardless of whether I am here or not, or whether I realize it or not, as human historical Dasein. But if human beings stand in Dasein, then one necessary condition for our ability to be here, Dasein, is this, that we understand being. Insofar as this is necessary, human beings are also historically actual. For this reason we understand being, and not only, as it might seem at first, as an evanescent meaning of a word. Rather, the definiteness with which we understand the indefinite meaning can be delimited unambiguously. So the definiteness that we used to understand being has an indefinite meaning, which can be sought through unambiguously. Okay? And not as subsequent addition, but as definiteness that, unbeknownst to us, rules us from the ground up. Yes, things can rule us without us knowing it. In order to show this, we will once again take the word being as our point of departure. But here, one must remember that we use the word in accordance with the guiding metaphysical question that we posed at the start, so broadly that it finds its limit only at nothing. Everything that is not simply nothing is, and for us, even nothing belongs to being. Being in a state of nothingness? Being nothing? Okay. Very interesting philosophical questions we got going on here. Heidegger is the man of words, family. The man of words.